Hi all, I'm Professor Tina Good, and this mini video will help you, I hope, develop your skill at writing body paragraphs for an expository essay that brings in outside research, outside voices, voices that you are incorporating in your essay besides your own. Okay? This will help you not only take control of your writing when navigating multiple voices, but it will also help you avoid plagiarism. It is my experience that most of the time when students end up plagiarizing, it is usually by accident. They are unfamiliar with how to bring in evidence, and so they accidentally end up plagiarizing because they haven't used the evidence correctly or they have introduced it incorrectly. Um, and so I have developed this formula to help you navigate that so that this idea of plagiarism doesn't happen to you, but more importantly, that you feel like you have control of your writing, even as you are bringing in other voices. Okay. Now, listen, this doesn't speak to those students who are choosing to deliberately cheat, to deliberately plagiarize, right? This is not going to solve the problem for those students who are using ChatGPT or Course Hero or, ways of, paying for essays. Or, I know there's all those resources out on the internet that say, hey, you know, send your assignment here and we'll write the essay for you and it'll all be good. Those are obviously cheating, and this formula does not help with that. But for those people who are choosing to try to develop their writing skills, I think this formula will help you. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I've developed a bit of a PowerPoint for you on this matter, but the name of I kind of have an acronym for the formula that I've developed, and it's called TIEIA. Now, I used to have just TEIA, the second I there, but students were still struggling with the formula. And so I added in that second I, even though it's a little clumsy. So what I encourage you to think about is, when thinking about an acronym, right? How is it valuable? It either spells something or it sounds like something else, right? So if you're familiar with the children's song, Old MacDonald Had a Farm, E-I-E-I-O, that's kind of what I patterned it after, right? The TIEIA, E-I-E-I-O, right? If that helps you. Okay. So what does it stand for? Well, it stands for, the T stands for topic sentence. The I stands for introduction of evidence. The E stands for evidence. The I, interpretation of evidence, and the A, analysis of evidence. Now, I'm going to tell you that in your other life outside of this class, probably the terms of interpretation and analysis are probably used interchangeably, and that's okay. But I'm giving them separate designation here to help you understand that there's two separate points within a body paragraph to help you develop your organization, to develop your coherence, to develop your argument, and to prove your overall thesis statement. Okay, so I'll talk about that, but I am aware that in other parts of your life, those terms are probably used interchangeably. All right, so what's a topic sentence? You probably have all heard of this, right? The topic sentence is generally the first sentence of a body paragraph. And when I say body paragraph, what I'm talking about here is not the introduction and not the conclusion, right? So those paragraphs in between. Right, because those two paragraphs are going to have their own, purposes and their own types of organization. And these are particularly paragraphs that you're bringing in outside research or outside voices. So you might be giving a little context, a little introduction of the material you're going to talk about, maybe definition of terms, things like that. where you might not need to use this paragraph. But when you're bringing in outside voices, this is the form that I want you to practice and that I want you to apply to your writing. The topic sentence then is, as you might imagine, the topic, but that's not really going far enough. I when we think of a topic, it can be really way too broad. Sometimes what I see people do is they have like here's my topic, and then they have several points, but because they think that's all in this one topic, they think it's okay. So yeah, it's a topic, but I want you to think of it more like a mini thesis statement. It is the subpoint that you are going to prove in that one paragraph. So that's why it has to be pretty narrow, right? Because you're going to prove this one subpoint in this paragraph. And that point is going to work towards proving your overall thesis statements, which does require, several points in order to prove. Okay. But you have to be able to prove this one point in this one paragraph, right? And if your paragraph's getting too long, then you're probably developing too many points, okay? So keep it very narrow, keep it very specific. Think of it as a subpoint that you're using to prove your overall thesis statement. What can I prove, right, in this short paragraph? A tip that I'll talk about later, but a tip to help you with this is to also, when you're proving that subpoint, bring in only one piece of evidence. And that evidence should also be very brief. If you have long evidence, probably trying to prove too much. Okay. So what's a topic sentence? It's generally the first sentence of the paragraph, and it states the subpoint that you are going to prove using evidence, interpretation, and analysis in that one paragraph. But also, especially when connecting body paragraph to body paragraph, it is going to provide what we call a transition. It is that language that you use to connect the two ideas, the idea from the previous paragraph to the idea of the present paragraph, right? Sometimes that's just repetition of terms, repetition of ideas, repetition of themes, right? But a lot of times what you've done is in the last sentence of the previous paragraph, you've started your transition, and then that first sentence wraps up that transition. This is what we call essay coherence, right? So that it flows from one point to the other. We see why this point is following the previous point. It's not just random, like just throw it all on page and hope it comes together, right? But that we see how they are connected. Okay, there should be a reason for why the paragraphs in your essay are in the order that they are in. And we can see that by those connections in the transitions. Transitions can also be between sentences. They can be between evidence and, your interpretations, all of that kind of thing. But for now, just think of them as being in your topic sentence and the last sentence of your previous paragraph, that you're using language to somehow show how these ideas are connected. Those are always your thoughts and never the thoughts of someone else, right? So that first sentence of your paragraph and the last sentence of the previous paragraph should never be somebody else's words. They should always be yours. That's how you maintain control, right, of your own writing. All right, so the second the first I in TIEIA is what I call introduction of evidence. Okay. What I see students do all the time is what we call drop evidence in. And you want to try to avoid that, right? So you want to signal to your readers that you are about to bring in a voice that is not your own, that you are bringing in information from another source besides your own thoughts. Okay. So you're going in this, the challenge of this really, it's really not hard to do an introduction of evidence. You just got to remember to do it. And the challenge of is just trying not to be, repetitive, right? According to, in her article this, just trying to change up that wording. But I'm not going to really worry about that as long as you are signaling to your reader with language that you are now bringing in somebody else's voice. Okay, that this is no longer you, but this is someone else. You're getting it from an outside source. I'm going to have examples later on to show you how this all works, but just think of that for now. And then E, of course, is evidence. Now, there's two kinds of evidence that we think about, and that is a direct quote from an outside source or a paraphrase. Okay, so all of these evidences need citation, whether it's MLA, whether it's APA, whether it's other some kind of source. Because I teach English, I'm working with MLA, but all sources, in no matter what you're using, it does need citation. Okay, so whether it's direct quote or paraphrase, you still need citation. So when using a direct quote, we call this in-text citation, right? So that is that the quote, you're not blocking off, you're not separating it out. It's actually within the text, right? And so notice here, I have Twenge observes that for young teens, all screen activities are linked to unhappiness. Okay, so we're giving a little bit of context there. The National Institute on Drug Abuse found that, notice how I've introduced the evidence. The National Institute on Drug Abuse found that, and now I'm bringing in a direct quote, right? So I've signaled to the readers that I am now bringing in evidence from an outside source, okay? From the National Institute in this case, probably contained within the Twenge article. Here's the direct quote, right? Notice quotation marks. Again, signaling the reader that this is not your words, right? 8th graders who spend 10 or more hours a week on social media are 56% more likely to say they're unhappy than those who devote less time to social media. End quote. Parentheses with the page number. This is MLA, remember. Parentheses with the page number. If I hadn't listed Twenge before, I might have to put that here. But for now, just parentheses with the page number. And notice that the period in this case comes after the page number, right? So what you have done is you have signaled to the readers, I'm now bringing in an outside voice, and you ended your quotation marks, you put the page numbers in, and so you're signaling to the readers, I have now ended that outside voice. That anything after this point will be from me. Okay? You see how you sort of bookended that outside information so that you signal to the readers, I'm bringing something in from the outside. Okay, I'm done with the outside, and now I'm going to be talking about me. This also helps you stay on task, right? You be in charge of your writing. You manage your research, okay? Now, it also works for paraphrasing, although in this class, I am going to ask you to not do paraphrasing. I find that people who you go into paraphrasing end up accidentally plagiarizing. And so for now, I just want us to practice with direct quotes, but I wanted you to see what that might look like in other classes when you get a little bit more experienced with navigating multiple voices, you might choose to paraphrase. So this is what it might look like. Same quote, but this is what we say. Twenge cites a study conducted by the National Institute on Drug Abuse, noting, right? So we've signaled, noting the National Institute, we're signaling, this is coming from an outside source, that all screen activities are connected to unhappiness for young teens. Specifically, she notes that 8th graders who spend more than 10 hours on social media per week are 56% more likely to say they are unhappy than those who spend less time on social media, right? So you're not directly quoting it, so you can't use quotation marks, but you're still paraphrasing pretty closely to it, okay? And then notice you signal to the reader, okay, I'm done. I am done with that outside voice. So here's the bookend. Specifically, she notes, right? And then paragraph, okay, we're done. Anything after this is going to be me. Okay, notice how short that evidence is too, right? We're just going to look at that stat in order to prove our overall topic sentence. Okay, I've not given you a topic sentence here at all, right? There's no topic sentence here. All this is bringing in our evidence. I'll show you an example later on. Notice, however, that we're keeping our quotes short, right? This is only, 1 to 2 lines. I'm going to show you how to block a quote later, but I would say do not exceed 4 or 5 lines. I mean, I think that's way too long anyway. I would keep it at around 2 or 3 lines, and limit the evidence to what you need to prove your point. Don't skew your evidence. Don't leave stuff out of your evidence that would actually prove the opposite of your point. So you leave that out. Don't skew it, but keep it short, right? Just what you need to prove your point. And also, you notice I gave a little bit of context to the evidence. Twenge cites a study conducted by the National Institute. Look at how short that is. You don't want to give a lot of context, right? Just enough to give your reader a heads up. This is, why I'm bringing this evidence in and what the evidence is going to do. Okay. All right. When, again, dealing with evidence, whether you're quoting it or paraphrasing it, what you need to do is you also then need to restate your evidence. Notice I have this under E. I'll talk about it in interpretation of evidence, but I don't want you to get confused because restating it is not the same as interpreting it. It's just making it easier for your reader to understand. We should be able to read your essay without ever looking at the evidence to understand what the evidence says. Okay, that's what the purpose of. We shouldn't have to read that quote in order to know what the quote is saying. Okay, so you restate it in your own words, in your own voice, right, and capture what you want your audience to understand about that evidence that you've just brought in. When you're bringing in statistics, you want to restate those statistics using, different language, right? So I've given you an example here. And I'm just making this up, so don't use this as evidence anywhere. But, you might have, the quote that says there's a statistic out there that says 33% of high school students drop out of school. Okay. So you might say something like this, according to the Department of Education, right? Listen, I'm introducing the evidence. Here's the direct quote, 33% of high school students drop out of school, and quote parentheses. Okay, there's your quote. That means that 1 out of every 3 students in America today are not receiving their high school diplomas. Okay, so notice how I've changed it. 33%, okay, that's all right. But maybe, people are like, okay, well, 33%, that's not that high. Then when you switch it around, you go, that means 1 out of 3 students are not graduating. That has impact, right? So make sure that the statistic has meaning to your readers, but also now look, I could just skip over that quote. I wouldn't even have to read that stat. That we would say, you'd have your paragraph, you skip over the quote, and you go to, that means that 1 out of every 3 students in America today are not receiving their high school diplomas. I don't need to read the 33%, right? I got it, but now it's in your own voice. Again, for this class, I only want you to use direct quotes, okay? I don't want you to use paraphrasing. All right, interpretation of evidence. The question that we're asking when we're doing interpretation is, what does our evidence mean? Okay, so you've restated it. What does it mean? Why does it mean what you're saying it means? avoid the word this, okay? Stay away from the word this. This means this, no. You need to break down what you mean by the word this, right? Because you need to show your readers how you went from point A to point B, right? I always say it's like a math problem. You can't just give the answer. You have to show your work. How did you get there, right? So show us what it means and why it means what you say it means, right? Do not assume that your readers are reading it the same way you are, right? So I see this all the time. They give the evidence and they say, this is why, we need to do something about high school. What is this, right? You need to show us what this means, right? And then make sure your evidence means what you say it means. Don't make a mistake there, right? Show us what it means, why it means what you say it means, and make sure that it does mean what you say it means, right? A lot of times what I see is people have misinterpreted the information. They've skipped over something. So just go back when you're checking it and make sure that the evidence actually means what you're saying it's meaning. Make sure that you've copied the evidence correctly, right? And you didn't leave out a word not or something like that. Okay. And then, like I said, restate your evidence, restate stats in order to prove your point. Again, so analysis, again, people use interpretation and analysis interchangeably. That's okay. They're not incorrect. I'm just breaking down the 2 points here so that you can see the multiple steps. And remember, guys, this is one paragraph. TIEIA is one paragraph. Do you see why you have to keep everything short, right? Your interpretation, they say, should be twice as long as your evidence, and your analysis 3 times as long, right? So you need to keep all of that pretty short, right? So analysis is you're taking that interpretation of the evidence and you're connecting it back to your topic sentence or your overall thesis statement. Again, this is your voice now. This is your voice. You're not using anybody else's voice here to make your point. You've taken in their evidence, you're using their evidence, but now you're using that evidence to prove your own point. Not their point, your point. Okay? Show the connection between your interpretation of evidence and how it connects back to your topic sentence and your thesis statement. But also, again, remember that idea of transition. That last sentence or so of your analysis will probably also be connecting to the topic sentence of your next paragraph, again, providing that transition. And this is where I say, this is where you show your brilliance. This is where we show your connections, how you are using somebody else's evidence to prove your point. Okay? So what does that look like? Here we go. I have a text here. You guys are probably familiar with it. It has a smartphone destroyed a generation by Jean M. Twenge, okay? And I have a working thesis statement, right? This is not a polished thesis statement. We've talked about that in my video on thesis statements. So here's the working thesis statement that I will be working to prove in this essay that I'm writing. And it says, while Twenge may not disagree with the benefits of information gathering our new technologies may now afford human beings around the world, it is likely she would argue that allowing unrestricted connectivity for young teens will cause them unnecessary suffering. Okay? And so I've given a little context in the thesis statement, but what I'm going to prove is that Twenge would suggest that unrestricted connectivity will cause teens unnecessary suffering. Okay? So here's my TIEIA paragraph. Notice I've designated the TIEIA. I think it's a really good idea while you're in this class to designate your sentences in your paragraphs as TIEIA, right? So first of all, you keep control of that format. You see where it is. You don't blur the lines, right? And then also, when I'm looking at it and I can go like, oh, I see what they're doing. Oh, I see. Okay. And then, if it's right on, I can go, great, well done you. Or I can see where I can help you navigate where you might not quite be getting it exactly right. Maybe you're blurring something. But then I can see what your thought process is, right? So here's the topic sentence. Teen use of social media to connect with others is causing them irreparable harm. Okay, that's my topic sentence. Teen use of social media to connect with others is causing them irreparable harm. That's what I'm going to prove in this paragraph. Okay, and here, give a little context, a little transition, if you will, between my topic sentence and my evidence. Twenge observes that for young teens, all screen activities are linked to unhappiness. Now, let me give you a point here. If this is the first time that I am introducing the audience, this particular author's name in the essay, I need to write the full name out. Okay, I need to write out Jean M. Twenge. Right? If this is the first time that I've introduced this author into the essay, I need to write out the full name. Make sure you capitalize it correctly. Make sure you spell it correctly. If, however, I've already mentioned Jean M. Twenge, I don't need to say Jean M. Twenge every time. Okay, I can just say Twenge. But if this is the first time that I brought her in, then you need to state the whole name. Okay, so Twenge observes that for young teens, all screen activities are linked to unhappiness. Right? Little context, little transition between topic sentence and the evidence. And then I'm introducing the evidence. The National Institute on Drug Abuse found that. This is who brings in this evidence. Here's the quote. Notice I put the E here, right? That's how short the introduction of evidence has to be. But you can't just drop in the quotes, 8th graders, blah, blah, blah. Have to introduce it. Who is saying this? The National Institute on Drug Abuse found that, quote, 8th graders who spend 10 or more hours a week, blah, 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 end quote, parentheses. Okay? Okay, now here we go with the interpretation. Notice the first thing I do is I restate my evidence. The study found that over half of the 8th graders studied who spent just over an hour a day. Notice how I've restated that, right? 10 or more hours a week, I say just over an hour a day on social media, said they were unhappy. The opposite of which was true for 8th graders who met with their friends in person. Notice I can skip over the quote itself because I have restated it. We should be able to do that as readers. You got to keep it in, right? But we should be able to skip over it as readers. Okay, the easy access to communication to others. Now we're in interpretation. The easy access to communication to others through social media is very likely depriving young teens of the intimacy needed for developing authentic friendships that they receive in face-to-face interactions. Okay, so I've taken that quote, 8th graders who spend an hour a day on social media, this is the consequences of it, right? That easy access to communication through social media is depriving them of the intimacy they need for developing real friendships, authentic friendships, okay? So then, analysis. Look how long my interpretation is compared to my evidence. You see how it's like at least twice as long, okay? And then A, if authentic friendship is a necessary component for human happiness, going back to the thesis statement, the use of social media as a substitute for in-person connections will not only lead to unhappy teenage populations, it will also deprive them of developing the skills for building and maintaining relationships later in life. Okay, so I've taken that quote and I've analyzed it to show how it's proving my overall thesis statement, which is causing them unnecessary suffering, right? But I've also set up a transition so that my next paragraph might be something about developing skills for building and maintaining relationships. Okay? Right? So that might be my next paragraph. Avoiding plagiarism. So by using this, you can see, right, that it forces you to keep your citations short so you don't actually, accidentally plagiarize, right? You've signaled to the readers when you're bringing it in, and you've signaled to the readers, I'm done. You can't just, paraphrase an entire piece of evidence in your paragraph and then put a page number at the end of the paragraph and go like, okay, I've plagiarized. You have plagiarized if you do that, right? So you see, it's very controlled, it's very structured, and therefore you will avoid plagiarism. But more importantly, it also helps you maintain control of your own writing, of your own essay, of your own point. Okay. Now, let's say you have a longer quote, which is possible, right? It's possible. I'm going to say to you, if you have a quote that's longer than 2 lines, that you need to block it. You can block a quote that's shorter than that if you want to call, particular emphasis on it. But I'm going to say, if your quote is longer than 2 lines, then block it. And I'm also going to tell you that blocked quotes do not count towards your minimum page length, right? So if you have long evidence, and your minimum page is 2 pages, and you have 2 pages and you have all these block quotes, you have not met the requirements of the assignment. Okay, so notice a block. What it means is, I've blocked the quote over, right? So here, we still introduce, right? Twenge observes that for young teens, all screen activities are linked to unhappiness. The National Institute on Drug Abuse found that, right? But instead of doing quotation marks now, what you do is you tab set twice or 10 spaces, however you have your computer set up, right? Tab set twice, it's one additional tab over than a regular paragraph, right? So you have your paragraph, 1 indentation, your block quote, 2 indentations, okay? Notice in MLA, it is still double spaced. It is not single spaced. So you don't have to go back and forth, single space, double space. And MLA, everything is double spaced, right? You only keep this side of the margins, justified, right? So, sorry, this part does not have to be justified. So don't justify this part of it, right? This part can be uneven. But this is the only part that needs to be justified, right? 2 tab sets in, no quotation marks. You still have to introduce, right? But there's a slight difference here. And I don't know why. I can't explain this. It's just an MLA thing. But you notice that in the previous, when we kept it within the paragraph, the period came after the page number. When you block a quote, the period comes before the page number, and then the page number. Okay. All right. So a little technicality there. I don't know how much I will pay attention to that, but many professors will. So you want to know about that, right? And then you're going to come back here and you're going to give your restatement here. You're going to give your interpretation here. You're going to give your analysis here, right? You never begin or end your paragraph with somebody else's words, right? They must be your words. You are working to prove your point, not theirs. Okay, so I hope that you have found this video useful. I'd like to see you apply this in all your expository writing here on out. And I highly recommend that when you're doing your expository writing in this class, that you identify your sentences as TIEIA until you get the hang of it. And remember, in this class, you must use direct quotes. Okay? So good luck with your essays. I look forward to reading them. I hope this will help you not only with this class, but with all of your academic writing. Have a good day.